we used to have.
Is it not still there? Because that's
why I haven't been raising my hand the last couple months. Oh.
That's a Zoom policy, not a me policy, I think. I don't remember changing anything that would change that. And unfortunately, I can't raise my hand in my own session. I don't see any settings that would change that. Hold on a second. So right now, if you try to raise your hand, nothing happens?
There's no button to raise your hand.
Huh. That's weird. I mean, Zoom keeps updating things. And I don't know if they've updated that. Wait, if you go to reactions. And you're muted, by the way. Oh, did I lose you? Aaron? Nope, I still have volume. It said so you can't unmute yourself. Okay, hold on. It says allow participants to unmute themselves. Let's try that again. Try it again.
All right, that worked now. Thanks, Rabbi.
There we go. It's okay. It's, like I said, Zoom keeps updating and changing where buttons are. So if you look under reactions, I see a raised hand button.
Where do you see? Oh, they
made it a whole set of buttons.
No. I had it too, but then it went away. Where'd it go?
That's my question with Zoom. Every time they change different features.
I saw a hand over your.
Yeah, I put up under
hand,
reaction.
I saw a hand over your. I don't have a where's reaction? It used to be under participant. Oh, there it is. Reaction. Where's raise? Oh, over here it is. Raise your hand.
There you go. Found it. Perfect.
All right. Thanks, Rabbi. And
no problem.
Hand. All right.
Like I said, it's been a while since I've used it, and in the few weeks I was away, they changed it because they're updating. I just wish they put a few more pointers that told us how they were updating things rather than just having to dig for them.
Yeah, that's been missing for like a couple of months now, I think. That's why I haven't raised my hand the last few times.
Gotcha. And I wasn't looking for it because I never have to raise my hand in my own class. That's the perk of being the teacher, is you can just talk whenever you feel like it and you don't have to raise your hand. All right. Well,
where did we leave off at the end of chapter? Are we at the beginning of 13?
We finished the first and second Mishnayot in chapter 13. So I have it set that we're beginning with Mishnah 3. But I'm going to do a very brief recap because there's a topic that we need to make sure that we've got in mind. Let me just overlay it here. So yeah, this is trying to see. All right, so I think it's easier just to recap it verbally. All right, so chapter 13, the whole first chunks of it are dealing with the issue of the difference for when a girl has been betrothed on her behalf by her mother or brother because her father has died. So according to the rabbinic understanding of how the Torah is laid out, if a father makes a betrothal on behalf of his daughter, that betrothal is considered to be binding according to Torah level of marriage. Now, she's still not married until she agrees to it in the end. She's still not married until they do the final section of the wedding ceremony. But in the meantime, the betrothal, the super engagement, if you will, means that she is counted as biblically engaged, deoraita. However, only the father has the authority to make that level of engagement. If he's out of the picture, That is to say, if he is dead, or if he has already done this once and then she has been divorced, then she is now not able to be subject to that effect. However, if he died and she's never been engaged at all, her brother or mother can arrange for an engagement, a betrothal on her behalf, but it lacks the same deoraita, Torah level of bindingness. It is instead considered rabbinically, the Rabbanan, as a level of betrothal. As we have been dancing through the issue of Yevamot, the issue of levirate marriage, one of the things that we have had as our dance partner many, many times is what happens when the marriage is of a different quality than the standard marriage, or what happens when the relationship is of a different quality. So chapter 13, we're re-exploring that concept, but here within the narrow confines of a young woman who has been betrothed on behalf of herself to someone else. Now, this is going to deal with some of the implications of that. We'll eventually get to the levirate implications, but we're going to deal with a couple of the other implications along the way. One of them is that the girl can simply refuse. She can make a formal declaration that she refuses the person that was appointed for her by her mother or brother, and that nullifies the relationship. As we can probably guess, that means we have to examine, well, what conditions mean that nullification is like a divorce, and what conditions mean that nullification is like there never was a marriage. Because whether or not they were married and divorced, or whether or not they were married and annulled in the sense of dissolving the original connection, makes a big difference for many other issues. We're going to start off unusually, and not entirely helpfully, in Mishnah 3 with Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov trying to give us a general rule of thumb, which will only make sense once we get into Mishnahs 4 and onward. But we're going to hit the general rule of thumb. I'll try to explain it very cursorily, but then we're going to see the examples in the following Mishnayot. All right, so just again, we are dealing here in a case of a girl that is pre-bat mitzvah age, where there is an engagement that has been arranged by her mother or brother because her father is deceased. That is our set of circumstances. And just to remind people, in the end, she was, of course, allowed, both in this case and even if her father had been the one to make the arranged marriage, to not go through with it, even though until the point where it wasn't completed, she would be considered betrothed. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says otherwise. That is to say, this is his general rule. If there is any obstruction in the matter due to the man, it is as if she were his wife. If there is any obstruction in the matter that is not due to the man, it is as if she were not his wife. And very helpfully, this statement will be explained in the Gemara. All right, we're not going to go into the Gemara, but instead I'm going to give you a brief explanation, and then the rest of the Mishnah will try and make that a bit clearer. So the obstruction here means that if there is something that prevents them from fully completing the marriage when she is an adult, if that happens because of him, meaning if he takes actions which dissolves the relationship, then she and he are considered as though they were husband and wife. And all the implications of could he marry her relatives and all those other things we've talked about, those would snap into place. On the other hand, if the reason that they don't continue and finalize the marriage of being husband and wife is because of her decision, meaning not his decision, then it is as though they were never married at all. She is not considered to have been his wife, and none of the issues surrounding whether she's been married or not, for example, whether she could eventually marry a Kohen later, none of those considerations snap into effect, and it is as though she has never had a relationship at all. That's the brief summary. If it's his choice to basically divorce her, then she is treated as though she were married. If it's her choice to refuse him, then it's as though there was never a relationship at all. Aaron.
So, Rabbi, once if a minor marries an adult, I guess a minor female, only the minor has the right to refusal. The guy does not have the right to refusal, right?
As an adult, correct, right? Because the adult is considered to be entering into a legally binding contract of his own free will. However, it was not uncommon for two minors, the boy and the girl, to each be entered into a betrothal by their respective families. So both of them would have the right to refuse. But we're dealing more with the implications here on the female side because there tended to be more implications. And since the young man often had more authority, for example, to offer a get, that put him in a different position. So we are dealing here, yes, with the case where it is a minor girl is the most important element as the actor.
And a minor guy, could a minor male refuse too?
Yes, if his parents arrange something for him that he is not agreeable to, he can refuse. But more to the point, he can actually just give a get.
Right. But if he gives the get, he has to pay the ketubah.
Depending upon how things were arranged, possibly yes.
Oh, there's a way. I thought you had to pay the ketubah. I didn't think you could contract around that.
Well, yes and no. It depended upon your local community. There are official rules that the community might enforce regardless of your personal wishes. And then there are the actual minimum rules. Now, the rabbis established that all communities should follow the minimum rules that the rabbis have established, the sort of baseline for ketubot. There are technically ways to try and contract around that, but the community frowned heavily on people who did so.
Right. And when you say community, are we talking about during the time of the Mishnah time and times when the rabbis actually had a real authority, like legal authority? Or are we talking about afterwards when they only had persuasive authority?
So we're talking about most of the last 2,000 years. It's important to recognize that the rabbis may have lacked the legal authority of life and death for most of the last 2,000 years. We couldn't sentence people to death except under very extraordinary circumstances, usually where that power was pushed upon us by the non-Jewish state government. But those are very rare exceptions to our situation for most of the last 2,000 years. But the rabbis did reserve the right to impose monetary fines, did reserve the right to administer flogging in particular cases, and they did reserve the right to dissolve some relationships if they were put together inappropriately. That is to say, if people were marrying who shouldn't be married. So they did have a great deal of authority, but that authority was vested more within the community's willingness to go along with the rabbi's authority, rather than a overarching rabbinic structure that could force the community to go along. This is what I often call the soft dictatorship of rabbinic Judaism, that the rabbi had full authority to administer Jewish law as long as the community went along with it.
I thought I thought from Rabbi Akiva all the way below that the rabbis did not have any discretion. They had to go with the rulings of the Sanhedrin.
Correct. But the rulings of the Sanhedrin did not tell you what you had to do in the middle of Lithuania in 1800.
Yeah, but from Akiva below, I thought, because there were no Jews in Lithuania before Akiva.
Well, I thought you meant by Akiva, and I thought you meant Akiva and afterwards.
Oh no, Akiva and before there was no discretion on the rabbis. You had to give the ketubah minimum, whether it be 100 or 200 zuz.
Give or take where you were living. So different parts of the Jewish diaspora had different levels of rabbinic enforcement. So if you were living within the land of Israel, even under Roman occupation, generally speaking, you would be forced to comply with Jewish law. Sometimes you could, unfortunately, appeal to Roman law. That was considered a big no-no, but some people did that. But if you were living in a community outside of Israel, then very often they did not have that level of rabbinic authority, of full mosaic smicha to compel you to obey the will of their decisions. But even without that mosaic smicha, they still ruled on these cases, and the community still abided by their rulings in most locations, most locales.
All right. Yeah, I was just wondering when you said, since we're studying Mishnah, when you said it depends on the community, I was wondering if you're talking about the Mishnaic community or if you were talking about how it's interpreted today.
Now, I was talking about for history, and you're right. It's sometimes I slip into historical mode rather than the specific era of just the Mishnah.
All right. Thanks.
All right. So Mishnah 4 is going to give us a lot more information about what we were talking about in Mishnah 3, but keep that rule in mind. If it's up to him, then she's treated as a wife. If it was up to her, then she's not treated as though she were married to him, not a wife. So if a minor girl refuses a man, he is permitted to marry her close relatives, such as her mother or her sister, and she is permitted to marry his close relatives, such as his father or brother, and he has not disqualified her, from marrying into the priesthood, as she is not considered divorce. So this means if it was prevented because of her, that was the obstruction. Obstruction is a rough word in English. In this case, it just means the marriage didn't get finalized on account of something she chose to do, or rather, more specifically, something that wasn't his choice, but in this case, hers. So that means that they were never married. So he is still permitted to her family. She's permitted to his. So she can go into the priesthood, or that is to say, marry into the Kohanim. It's as though there never was any relationship between them. However, if he gave her a bill of divorce, meaning it is now his action that is preventing the marriage from being finalized, then even though the marriage was valid according to rabbinic law and not Torah law, he is prohibited from marrying her close relatives, and she is prohibited from marrying his close relatives, and he has disqualified her from marrying into the priesthood. So even though it's not a Torah level, which is going to come back much more importantly when we get to Yevamot, to Levirate marriage, for these other topics, the rabbis do consider this to be binding enough that if he has continued the practice or continued the process through the giving of a get, that we just implement all of the normal marriage restrictions that fall into place if he has been married. If she has been married. I'll make sure I'll get my words in the correct order. So those are the two general categories. Now we're going to get into some more exceptional cases, as is normal. Let me just try and see if I can get as much as possible on the page. If he gave her a bill of divorce, same situation so far, but afterwards remarried her, and she subsequently refused him and married another man, and then she was widowed or divorced from her second husband, she is permitted to return to him. All right, so let's make sure we get the general rule and then see what the exception is in this case. In a general rule, if a man divorces a woman and she marries someone else, then she cannot get remarried to her first husband, even if when she is remarrying because of widowhood or divorce. She's not allowed to go back to her first husband. Here, however, she is allowed to return to the first husband, even though he divorced her. But you'll notice he actually married her kind of twice. The first time they betrothed and he divorced. The second time they got remarried, rebetrothed, and she refuses him. And then she subsequently marries another man. And in the way this all plays out, under these circumstances, she is. Why? Well, our commentary tries to explain. Since she left him the last time by means of refusal, the refusal cancels the bill of divorce that he gave her previously, and her status is that of a minor girl who refused her husband, who is not forbidden to her first husband after a second marriage. Now, all of this presumes that she was still a minor at the time of the last relationship, the refusal that she had with her first husband, because only a minor is exercising the right of refusal. Everyone else would be following normal divorce proceedings. So because of her refusal, that was the last relationship they had. And since that last relationship means that she wasn't ever married to him, that retroactively wipes out everything that came prior to it. Because remember, everything that came prior to it was still only rabbinic in the first place. Does that make sense? All right.
Yes.
However, let's change things around. If the order was different, and if she refused him, meaning in their first encounter, and he subsequently remarried her, and this time he gave her a bill of divorce, and she married another man, and she was widowed and divorced, she is forbidden to return to him, like any divorced woman who married another man. So again, with all of this relationship happening while she is still a minor under her mother or brother's authority, if she refuses him the first time, but then they get married again, but this time he gives her a divorce, and now she goes ahead and gets married to someone else and then gets widowed or divorced from husband number two, that status of the bill of divorce as the last marker of their relationship carries forward. She is treated as though she were as any other wife, and a divorced woman cannot remarry her first husband if she has married a second husband in the meantime. Hopefully that makes it clear. So we're going to do a general principle. And do you want to see the general principle first, or do you have a question on that last part?
So kind of if he gives her a divorce, then she flat out loses her right of refusal.
If he gives her a divorce, then from that relationship, she indeed cannot exercise her right of refusal. However, if they get re-betrothed while she is still a minor, she could refuse him at that point, and that would wipe out the divorce status that she had from the first encounter they had together.
So, and you said, and it's my understanding that if the father marries her, or she has to refuse it right away, or she can't refuse it again until she becomes of age, right?
Right, exactly. It's more of a becoming of age, last-ditch effort. So here is then the general principle. This is the principle concerning a minor girl who refused her husband and then married several times. If the bill of divorce followed the refusal and she remarried, she is forbidden to return to him. If the refusal followed the bill of divorce, she is permitted to return to him. And the summary explanation is, since the refusal followed the bill of divorce, it is clear that she was a minor, and neither the marriage nor the divorce were valid by Torah law. However, when the ultimate separation is by means of a bill of divorce, there is no indication that she was a minor at the time, and there is potential for confusion with an adult divorcee. So, if you keep that order, everything is clear. Now, you might be wondering how common this is. Sometimes we discuss this when we look at different Mishnayot. This is not really that implausible. You can come up with different situations where the families are trying to make arrangements. And on the one hand, the girl says maybe, and then she says no. And on the second hand, the guy says no. And then they change the deals a little more and they come back. Unfortunately, people could indeed get caught up in situations like this. So the rabbis needed to make clear what would happen, especially for the wrinkle in the normal process of her being a minor at the time that all of this is taking place. All right, Mishnah 5 is going to continue on this same theme. I just go ahead and load that up to the middle. If a minor girl refuses one man and marries another, and he divorces her, and then she marries another man and refuses him, and then she marries another man and he divorces her, meaning she is going through multiple. The first is a refusal, the second is a divorce, the third is a refusal, the fourth is a divorce. This is the principle for this case. With regard to anyone she leaves by means of a bill of divorce, it is prohibited for her to return to him. With regard to anyone she leaves by means of refusal, she is permitted to return to him. Again, all of this presupposes her being a minor, and since she is moving from one to another, and to another, not the first and then refusal, the second, the first again and then divorce, but instead refusal from one and then no other relation, divorce from the other, no other relation, and so on, we treat each of them as a separate case. So she is considered to be divorced from number 2 and number 4, but she is considered to have never had a relationship with number 1 and number 3. So she cannot return to number 2 and number 4, unless she hasn't married a number 5, I would imagine, because she got divorced from them. But she could return to a 1 and 2, even though she was betrothed to 2 and 4 in the meantime between them. Yes, sir.
Why can't she return to number 4?
I said she can't return to number 4 just because they are laying it out like that. But I said that would only be if she had indeed married a number 5 that wasn't listed. But yes, technically, if she married number 4 and he divorced her, and then number 4 wanted her back again, and she had not married anyone in the meantime, technically she would be permitted, yes. Okay, now we get back into levirate marriage, into Yevamot. So we are in Mishnah number 6. With regard to one who divorces a woman and remarries her and then dies childless, that's our standard case for all of this Masechet, his wife is permitted to enter into levirate marriage with her Yavam, the brother-in-law. But Rabbi Elazar prohibits this. Likewise, with regard to one who divorces an orphaned minor girl, whose mother and brothers married her off and remarries her, subsequently dies, she is permitted to the Yavam and levirate marriage, and Rabbi Elazar prohibits it. So let's go ahead and take care of those first 2 cases. So if somebody divorces and then remarries them, and then he dies, then they are permitted into levirate marriage, despite the ups and downs, if you will, of the in and out of the marriage. On the other hand, or rather similarly, in the case of a divorce, one who divorces the orphaned minor girl, which is the category that we call for a girl that is without her father, whether it is her mother or brother who has married her off, or whether it is indeed herself after her father had married her and then that first relationship was dissolved. Lost my train of thought. Likewise, right, in that situation, and then he divorces but then remarries her and then he subsequently dies, she is still permitted to do Yavam in the levirate marriage. Now, a minor girl whose father married her off, in which case the marriage is valid by Torah law, and who was subsequently divorced while she was still a minor, is like an orphan during the lifetime of her father, as he no longer has the right to marry her off, which I've mentioned parenthetically a couple times. And she cannot become fully married because she is a minor. And if the husband remarries her while she is still a minor and then dies childless, everyone agrees that she is forbidden to the Yavam and may not enter into levirate marriage. So in that third case, because of her becoming fully independent while still a minor, because she was divorced as a minor from the first arranged marriage that was done by her father, that means that she does not have enough binding power as a minor to make the legal commitment for a new marriage. In the previous cases, there was enough binding power, even if it was d'Rabbanan rather than d'Oraita, rabbinically put in place rather than Torah put in place, to create the bond sufficient to cause the levirate marriage to be necessary or dissolved by chalitza in the first 2 examples. Clear?
Yes, clear.
Okay.
In the final sample, though, if they divorce from the father, the mother and brother can still marry her off, right?
Yes, but in this particular case, they are. Sorry. In the third case, where the minor girl's father married her off and then she gets divorced, that's it. She is her own agent at that point.
I thought she can't get.
Go ahead.
I thought she couldn't remarry till she turned of age.
Right, but that's what I mean by she's her own agent. So no one else can betroth her on her behalf. Any additional betrothal will happen when she is of age.
All right.
All right. And now we begin to see some of the different implications of this in even more complicated levirate marriage situations. If two brothers are married to two minor sisters, and the husband of one of them dies childless. All right, so remember the whole issue about marrying the sister of your wife. This is kicking in. However, excuse me, we need to clarify what happens in these cases because of the minor, the age of the two people that are involved, the two girls being minors. Okay, so with that in mind, let me go ahead and start from that beginning. If two brothers are married to two minor sisters, and the husband of one of them dies childless, this, meaning the widowed girl, shall be exempt from levirate marriage due to her status as a forbidden relative, as one is prohibited from marrying the sister of his wife. So because the marriage is of minor status, both meanings of that term, that means that he does not have the ability to marry the sister of his wife in order to create the levirate bond. And indeed, this implies and is explained further in the next phrase. The same halacha applies to two deaf women. Deaf mute, remember, in the ancient world, were not able to enter into the same level of legal contract as those who could hear and speak because of the diminished mental capacity that came in the ancient world when people who had this condition from birth were not able to properly develop their mental capacities due to the lack of symbolic language, and thus did not have the same status legally. So the same halacha applies to them, whose status is like that of two minors in this matter, as their marriages are valid by rabbinic law. And if the two brothers were married to two sisters, one of them an adult and the other a minor, meaning one adult sister, one minor sister, and the husband of the minor dies, the minor shall leave due to her status as the sister of a wife, as in the first case in the Mishnah. But if the husband of the adult dies, it generates the Torah obligation of levirate marriage, which is not abrogated by the rabbinic prohibition of prescribing the Yevamot as his wife's sister. This prohibition, is by rabbinic law because marriage to a minor is rabbinic in origin. What does one do under such circumstances? Right. So now we have this conundrum where the husband of the adult sister dies, and what happens to the brother who is married to the minor sister and his obligation on behalf of his deceased brother? Well, Rabbi Eliezer says we instruct the minor, that is to say, the wife of the living brother, to refuse him, to refuse her current espoused brother. That is to say, her husband, the brother of the deceased, so that her marriage is dissolved, and he may then enter into levirate marriage with her adult sister, the widow of his childless brother. So let's just make sure we got that really, really clear. Rabbi Eliezer is saying that we turn to the little sister and we say, well, you need to tell your betrothed husband that you will not marry him, that you are refusing him. Since you are a minor, you have the right to do that. Now, she probably wasn't planning to do that at this point. If she were, then it would have already happened. But they are telling her, I know it's bad that your sister just lost her husband, but you're going to lose the one that was going to be set up for you as well. In fact, he's going to marry your older sister. That is the general plan. So that frees him in order to execute the levirate requirements with the older sister. So that's Rabbi Eliezer's solution to this. We just give her instructions to go ahead and refuse the husband that is appointed to the second, the younger girl. Question?
Yes, Rabbi. I thought the Yevamot was only if the husband died. Oh, never mind. I think I had it reversed. I I figured it out. Sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Oh, wait. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Rabban Gamliel has a different take on this. He's not happy with Rabbi Eliezer's formulation. He says if the minor refuses on her own accord, her refusal is valid, right? If she just, it occurs to her that she doesn't want to be married to this guy, that's fine. And if not, she should wait until she reaches majority, until she becomes an adult, whereupon her marriage is valid by Torah law. And that widowed adult sister shall then be exempt from levirate marriage due to her status as the sister of a wife. So Rabban Gamliel is reluctant to encourage the refusal. He says if she wants to refuse, that's okay, but we should not be giving her that instruction. Instead, if she doesn't think of it on her own or doesn't want to do it on her own, we wait for her to become an adult. Once she reaches bat mitzvah age, then she becomes the adult wife of the living brother. And now he is freed of his bond to the sister who was married to the deceased brother, because he obviously can't do yibum with her because she is the sister of his wife. So Rabban Gamliel's solution to this is just wait. Of course, waiting means that the older sister would still remain trapped to the living brother.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, wasn't Yevamot generally between brothers, and now they flipped it between sisters? Where did that come from?
No. It's still between brothers, but the problem is the brothers are married to sisters.
All right.
So Bob Cohen and Frank Cohen each married one of the Levi sisters. And so when they die, when Bob dies, that means that Frank is supposed to marry the other Levi sister, the widow, but that's a problem because you're not allowed to marry your wife's sister. The reason that this is an issue here, because we already covered that long ago, is because one of the wives is still not of majority. So her status is not a full level of Torah marriage, but Yibum is a full level of Torah obligation. So how do we resolve that? Rabbi Eliezer offers one easy solution. Just have the minor refuse him. He's now free and never married to her, at least legally. And therefore, the adult sister can marry the brother of the deceased and do levirate, and it's all fine. Rabban Gamliel says we don't want to encourage refusals, so therefore we just sit and wait until the younger becomes of maturity, bat mitzvah age, and then that resolves the problem that way too, because obviously the brother cannot marry the widow because that's the wife of his now adult, that's the sister of his now adult wife. And Rabbi Yoshua is going to give us a different set of situations because he's going to say, in fact, it's bad for everyone. Rabbi Yoshua says, when the brother married to the adult sister dies, leaving the brother married to the minor, woe to him for his wife, woe to him for his brother's wife, right? Under these circumstances, he loses both women. Why? He must relieve his own wife with a bill of divorce because he's not allowed to be married to her because she is a minor, and therefore his marriage to her is not binding enough to override the levirate marriage that he has with the other wife. And that means he needs to dissolve that relationship before it becomes any more binding, because he's not allowed to marry the sister of the woman he is now betrothed to because of levirate marriage. And he cannot do a full levirate marriage with the widow because, actually, I forgot that this one explains it much better. Right? That he can't marry the levirate widow, as the commentary will explain probably in fewer words than me. He cannot stay married to his wife because she is the sister of his Yevamah, and he cannot enter into levirate marriage with the Yevamah even after divorcing his wife, because the Yevamot is his wife's sister. Right? The principle that one is completely absolved from levirate marriage when the potential Yevamot is a forbidden relative does not apply because Torah law does not recognize his marriage to the minor wife. That marriage's rabbinic sanction does not suffice to render the Yevamot, his wife's sister, a forbidden relative who is not a candidate for levirate marriage. So according to Rabbi Yoshua, he gets the worst of both situations. He can't go on and get married to the minor girl when she reaches majority. He has to divorce her while she's still a minor. And he cannot get married through Yevamot to the widow of his brother, but instead has to do chalitza because there is enough of a bond to force that. Yes, Aaron.
What would happen if she were to potentially refuse him in the third one before he had the chance to divorce her?
It doesn't matter because if you mean she refused him after the brother died, as soon as the brother dies, there is an immediate obligation through levirate marriage under all normal circumstances, which is how Rabbi Yoshua is treating this.
Right, but he can't divorce her if he beats her to the refusal, right? If she beats him to the refusal. But
she can't. I mean, literally, she becomes bound to him. The issue of between him and her, between him and the widow, happens automatically when the first brother dies. So there isn't a window of opportunity.
No, but the minor one can still do the minor one loses her right to refusal when she becomes tied to the Yevamot.
The minor one loses the right of the refusal once the surviving brother's obligation to divorce her becomes automatic when he is now bound to the widow sister. Right? He then becomes compelled to give a get. It's only a matter of time. But the compulsion, the requirement for the get, becomes instantaneous, in Rabbi Yoshua's opinion, when the first brother dies. So there's no longer a window for refusal. Now, I should point out that according to the way the Talmud works this out, the halacha follows Rabbi Eliezer. So we don't have to worry about being in the catch-22 of Rabbi Yoshua, and we don't worry ourselves too much about coaching people on refusals, even though Rabban Gamliel thought this could be an ongoing problem if it became too prevalent. We're not too concerned by it in these exceptional circumstances. So instead, if such a situation happens, Rabbi Eliezer says we talk to the minor, we give her the instructions of how to refuse the husband, and then we dissolve the levirate obligation either through yibum or through chalitza as is appropriate. Okay. Mishnah number 8. Similar complications. Excuse me. If a man was married to 2 orphan minors and died, consummation of levirate marriage or chalitza with one of them exempts her rival from either levirate marriage or chalitza, rendering her free to remarry. So he's married to the 2 orphan minors, and they're both in this special category of being minors. So therefore, they have this lesser form. Nonetheless, if he consummates the levirate marriage or does chalitza with one of them, then we treat it as though they were married like normal people, normal adult women, and it exempts the rival, as we have talked about before. So the issue would have been here is what he does with one, does it have an impact on the other because of the status of their betrothal situation? And the answer is yes, so far. Likewise, if 2 deaf mutes were married to one man who died, consummation of levirate marriage or chalitza with one of them exempts her rival wife. In both cases, both women are married by rabbinic law and consequently become Yevamot by rabbinic law. Since their statuses are equal, one can exempt the other. Okay. However, what if it is a mixed group? If one wife is a minor and the other is a deaf mute, So they both have a rabbinic status of marriage, which is weaker than the Torah status, but they each have a different rabbinic marriage from each other. Consummation of levirate marriage or chalitza with one of them does not exempt the rival wife. Although both are married by rabbinic law, their statuses are not the same, and one cannot exempt the other. Because they do not have identical situations, they don't count as being parallel enough to follow the general practice. If one of them was halakhically competent and one was a deaf mute, again, this means a mental competency we're talking about, consummation of levirate marriage with the halakhically competent wife exempts the deaf mute, as the halakhically competent women marriage and levirate marriage are by Torah law. But consummation of levirate marriage with the deaf mute does not exempt the halakhically competent wife, meaning that because she has the rabbinic status, then if something is done with her, it does not impact the halakhically competent woman. Likewise, if one was an adult woman and one was a minor girl, consummation of levirate marriage exempts the minor, but consummation of levirate marriage with the minor does not exempt the adult. So if you execute the proper steps with somebody that is of full legal standing, then it will have effect even on people of weaker legal standing, but the reverse is not true. If you consummate with the one with weaker legal standing, it does not impact the one with greater legal obligation. Clear and making sense? Okay. In fact, we're going to go ahead and, no, I think we're going to go ahead and leave it there. 9 gets a little more confusing near the end, and then I want to leave some room for 10 and onward. So let's go ahead and stop with 8, and we'll pick it up with Mishnah 9 next Wednesday.
All right. Thanks, Rabbi.
All right. Take care, everyone, and see you again next week. It is great to be back studying Mishnah together. Be well, everyone.